Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We hear from Lethbridge business owners and get their thoughts about having to pay back the pandemic business loans which were due today. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan discussed the city's financial state and housing crisis during the mayor's State of the City address on Thursday morning. And Canada could see up to 90,000 more Ukrainian refugees make their way to our country as so many continue to flee the war with Russia.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. For many small business owners across the country, today was D-Day. This was the deadline to pay back the $60,000 Canadian Emergency Business Account loan, also known as the pandemic loan. Now, there's a silver lining in all of this. If a business owner could pay back at least $40,000 of it by today, the remaining $20,000 would be forgiven. As BCN's Jeanette Rocher reports now, there are some, however, feel the business owners who really needed that grant are the ones who won't be able to benefit the most from it.
People like myself, we shut down 8 times in 18 months.
Vicki Vandenhoek is one of 900,000 business owners across the country who took out the Canadian Emergency Business Account loan to help her restaurant, Honker's Pub and Eatery, during the pandemic.
We all really needed the $60,000 would have been terrific because we never have recovered all of that yet.
The Lethbridge entrepreneur says she paid back the $40,000 portion of her $60,000 CEBA loan this past Monday, meaning she'll be one of the lucky ones who gets to keep the $20,000 forgivable portion.
And, very grateful for any of the forgiveness that we got from, the different organization of the government.
The deadline to pay back the interest-free loan was originally slated for December 31st, but was extended to January 18th.
There are about 22% that won't even receive the forgivable portion, unfortunately.
According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the feds dished out a total of $48.4 billion to 900,000 small businesses across the country. Here in Alberta, that number breaks down to $6.8 million borrowed to 125,000 small business owners, including Vandenhoek.
I know there's going to be some places that probably will be really hard to return.
Andrew Senier of the CFIB says about 1/3 of Alberta businesses anticipate being able to meet today's deadline without taking out any other forms of debt.
And the remainder have sort of gone through their banks and found other ways to meet the deadline. Otherwise, it goes into the full amount, which is $60,000. So with the federal government, you will be on 5% interest for 3 years.
Those loans were meant to help businesses that were in trouble due to the pandemic.
Hunter Hagee is with the Lethbridge Downtown BRZ and says, although the grant portion is appreciated, there's a flaw with the system.
The problem is in paying it back, the people who needed it the least, who were able to pay it back, are benefited by getting the grant portion of it. The people who really needed that money and can't pay it back yet will get punished and have to pay it all, including that grant portion. So in fairness, they should have just given that grant money to all businesses.
And it's got business groups worried that thousands of struggling entrepreneurs could be forced to close their doors if they can't pay it back by today's deadline.
It would be tragic to see all those organizations that made it through the pandemic and kept their doors open, and for something like this not to work out.
They're really stressed. Small businesses across the province are really stressed. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough 3 years for that matter. It started with the pandemic. I mean, nobody chose the pandemic. You and I didn't. Small businesses didn't choose the pandemic. The loans were there to support small businesses in their time of need. And these might be the loans that shut them down, which is very, very unfortunate.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
Hundreds of community members made their way to the Coast Hotel in Lethbridge on Thursday morning to hear the mayor's State of the City address. Mayor Blaine Hagan touched on many topics, including the financial state of our city. Hagan says inflation and the rising cost of living continue to have a real impact in our city here in Lethbridge.
We got to really tighten the purse string, for sure. There's many projects with inflation, everything is going the way that it is. We definitely have to tighten down and on spending and look for more efficient ways to do business. And so, yeah, it's tough coming out of COVID and with the different changes and stuff that have happened and the interest rates, but we'll try to do our best with what we've got.
Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan also addressed our city's homeless issue and what's being done to help those who are most vulnerable, especially during the colder winter months. Lethbridge has seen an increase in homeless, in particular with our Indigenous population.
I think the biggest thing is to be able to work with our partners, work with the Blood Tribe Department of Health, work with others. It's not just Indigenous that are on our streets, but it's a large percentage of the folks that are homeless within our community. So we need to work with all, and we need to work with the different agencies that can help these folks. And many of them that are struggling with addiction is a cause for the homelessness. So as we continue to work with the organizations to give them the opportunity to live a life of sobriety, which I think we all deserve, and it's something that we definitely will work on an ongoing basis. It's definitely a top item for me, for sure.
Well, it was another chilly and snowy day here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher joins us now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, we'll need to do more stretches to help with the snow shoveling since more of the white stuff may be on the way?
Oh yeah, stretches, always a good idea, Hal, no matter what. As we're looking to tomorrow, yes, we could see that light dusting as well, just a 30% chance though. Overnight, we're seeing clear skies, but very cold, -29 for the overnight low there. Feeling like -32 with that wind chill, so very, very cold. Also, as we get into Friday, we're seeing that high of -9, which puts us back in that seasonal range. However, as we head out the door in the morning, we're still gonna be exposed to that wind chill, so it's still gonna be a very cold morning. As we look to next week, that's where we're seeing some plus temperatures, possibly even a double digit in there. And I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about that. Hal?
Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Alberta government announced that a new Seniors Lodge review panel will be tasked with finding ways to make the most of existing Seniors Lodge spaces, which includes the lodge system's efficiency and sustainability. Seniors Minister Jason Nixon says Alberta's Senior Lodge program is the oldest social housing program in the province, which helps thousands of seniors annually.
There are over 10,000 lodge units across Alberta, and almost half of those are in rural communities like the communities that I call home, as well as, of course, in places like Edmonton where we are today. Senior lodges are integral to our communities to ensure seniors can age in the communities of their choice, remain close to their friends, remain close to their families, and to the communities that they help build. In my mandate letter from Premier Smith, I was asked to do the following: work with senior lodge providers to undergo a planned review for the purpose of expanding seniors' lodges and facilities to keep up with the increased growth and demand. We need to know, ultimately, what works and what does not work in our lodge program, especially as our population ages and the demand for seniors' housing continues to increase.
The Alberta NDP's housing critic Janice Irwin says the province needs more affordable housing for seniors, and increasing housing is the best way out of this housing crisis. Family members of people who died during a stabbing rampage in Saskatchewan say they don't have much faith in a coroner's inquest. Miles Sanderson killed 11 people and injured 17 others on the James Smith First Nation and in the nearby village of Weldon on September 4th of 2022. He died after being taken into police custody a few days later.
There's different levels of offenders, and we know that they talked about warrants and they talked about the priority. Well, for me, Miles should have been high on our list of priorities because of his record and because of his past, and he had a lot of violent offenses on his record. So why wasn't they do a lot more in looking for him? I don't know. The recommendations I'm looking for is maybe put a little more effort into finding these violent offenders. I was just on a phone just now on Facebook, and they're starting to post pictures of Saskatchewan Most Wanted on there, and they got pictures every week of 5 different people on there. So why wasn't Miles, or why wasn't that implemented before? Maybe we would have had more people looking for Miles if they knew that he was out there and what he looked like.
Israel's ambassador is urging Ottawa to clearly state its position on South Africa's genocide case against Israel that is now before the International Court of Justice. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has left many confused with his statements that Canada supports the UN's top court, but that doesn't mean that it supports the case. Political experts say the government is using waffling language to avoid taking a stand on a case that could further divide the Liberal caucus and Canadian voters. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is in Davos, Switzerland for a World Economic Forum discussion called No Recovery Without Trade and Investment. Freeland says Canada is the only country in the G7 which has a trade deal with every other G7 country. She says Canada has worked hard to develop solid trading relationships with many nations. She says there are two dominant trends which are having a direct impact on worldwide trade right now.
One is a focus on supply chain resilience, and that is just a reality. After the shock that we all experienced during COVID with things shut down, our people are just going to demand a little more security in their supply chains. And then that was multiplied, as Khaldoon said, by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And, Valdis can speak much more, with much greater experience than I can. But we all saw in particular how that really delivered a huge shock to Europe, the dependency that they had. So supply chain resilience, it's a reality, and we're all thinking about it in how we build our own trade relationships and also how we as Canada make a pitch to foreign investors. The other thing that's going on, and again, Khaldoon talked about this is a hugely transformative moment in the whole global economy. I think that right now we're living through a moment which is comparable only to the Industrial Revolution itself in terms of the energy transition and the way we need to retool all of our manufacturing.
Around 90,000 more Ukrainian emergency visa holders are thinking of moving to Canada before the government's deadline at the end of March. Operation Ukraine Safe Haven is one of several agencies preparing for a surge of Ukrainians and dealing with the challenges, including finding places for people to live. The federal government has issued more than 930,000 temporary emergency visas since March of 2020 for Ukrainians wanting to flee the war with Russia. So far, around 210,000 have made their way to Canada. An explosion at a fireworks factory in rural Thailand killed around 20 people on Wednesday. Government officials say at least 3 more were also missing. The blast occurred at Suphanburi, which is located around 95 kilometers northwest of Bangkok in the heart of Thailand's central rice-growing area. Emergency officials say there were between 20 to 30 workers at the factory at the time of the explosion. Rescue workers have been combing through the scene, said so far there have been no survivors. The Lunar New Year is celebrated in February when demand for fireworks is very strong in both Thailand and other parts of Asia. The National Disaster Agency has been called in to investigate the cause of the blast. A judge threatened Donald Trump with expulsion from his civil trial in Manhattan, New York on Wednesday after he ignored warnings to keep quiet while writer E. Jean Carroll testified that he shattered her reputation. Trump also says the judge will not let him attend his mother-in-law's funeral.
It was a very interesting day. As you probably noticed, it's a big story that the witness today, a person I never knew, I never had anything to do with. It's a totally rigged deal. This whole thing is rigged, election interference. But this is a person I have no idea, until this happened, obviously, I have no idea who she was, and nor could I care less. Same judge. He's a radical Trump hater. And I said, I will go to all days. So what happened very terribly is we asked to just delay the trial for one day so I could go to the funeral tomorrow, and then we could start Friday or Monday or any time they want. And he said, absolutely not. The trial will go on just as it is. You can go to the funeral or you can go to the trial, but you can't do both. I thought it was terrible.
The first primary of the Republican presidential contest takes place in New Hampshire on Tuesday. It'll mark the first traditional-style election of the year.
Voters will show up at the polls on Tuesday. They will fill out ballots, and we will get results hopefully Tuesday night. This election in New Hampshire, we're going to see Republicans voting, and undeclared voters are also able to vote in this election. The governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, has endorsed Nikki Haley, so he's showing his support there. But New Hampshire is a state where Donald Trump has won in the past 2 election cycles, and he does have a lot of support there. So New Hampshire is the first primary of this Republican presidential contest. The Iowa caucuses are the first contests, but the New Hampshire primary is the first in a traditional style election. This is the second attempt for these rivals of Donald Trump to try to stop him as he seems to be barreling his way to the nomination. It's a state where there's a lot more of an independent spirit among the voters there, and it's seen by some of these rivals as an opportunity to maybe peel off some of his support or maybe even deny him a win.
Well, we've seen quite a bit of the white stuff lately across much of southwestern Alberta, and there may be even more snow on the way as we edge a little closer to the weekend. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. The plows have been out in full force here in Lethbridge. We've had quite a bit of snow lately. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we've seen a lot of the white stuff in the past 24 hours, but is there still more to come?
Yeah, only a little bit though. We are just expecting a 30% chance on Friday. Daytime high of -9, not too bad. We're still expecting very cold wind chill in the morning though, so definitely be prepared for that. As we get into Saturday, high of -9 up to -7 on Sunday, -6 on Monday. I like where this trend is going here. And then look at that, just like that on Tuesday, we are up into the plus digits. And there we go. I told you I saw a double digit in there. We're looking at a high of 10 degrees on Wednesday to round out that 7-day forecast. So that will put us well outside of this range here. Average high for this time of year, -2, average low -14. 11, that was our record high on this day back in 1986, and in 1950 we had the record for our chilliest day, which was -40. 8:21, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sun set this afternoon at 5:04 p.m. We're now looking at 8 hours, 43 minutes of daylight, 2 minutes longer than yesterday. And let me tell you, it's wonderful to see the sun up past 5 o'clock these days. Okay, so Victoria still looking at another round of snow today and into tonight as they're into that snowfall warning still throughout tonight, looking at 5 to 10 centimeters and then some periods of freezing rain overnight. By the morning though, we're looking at periods of rain tomorrow, high of 5 degrees. 5 also expected for a daytime high tomorrow in Vancouver. And after a night of rain and snow, looking at mainly rain, looking at 10 to 20 millimeters of rain in the Vancouver metro area there. Edmonton looking at a high of -16, still extremely cold wind chill though in the morning, -40, risk of frostbite, -14 for a daytime high in Calgary. Calgary also seeing that morning wind chill of -30. Okay, in Saskatoon, -22, very cold wind chill though. Actually, the wind chill gets kind of worse throughout the day. By the afternoon, they're looking at a -36 for wind chill, and Regina -20, looking at -34 for wind chill, mainly sunny skies there. For -14 for a high, in Winnipeg looking at periods of snow ending in the morning. Toronto also seeing a 60% chance of some flurries there, -7 for a high, -13 expected in both Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow with mainly sunny skies. As we get into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton also seeing mainly sunny skies, high of -6 though, -2 for an expected high in Halifax, looking at 20 to 40 K winds, 60 K winds in Charlottetown, -6 for a high there, and very windy in St. John's, looking at 60 to 80 K winds, 100 km/h winds though along the coast, also under a snow squall warning, so we could see 5 to 10 centimeters of snow within those snow squalls, particularly -4 for the high there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Businesses can get up to a third of their pandemic loans forgiven if they repay the outstanding amount by today's deadline. After today, the debt will convert into a 3-year loan with 5% annual interest. Hundreds of thousands of business owners and nonprofit groups received a Canada Emergency Business Account loan of up to $60,000 during the pandemic. Some business groups have called for an extension, saying it could mean closure for many firms. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said it is time to wrap up pandemic financial aid programs. Business owners who refinance their loans with a financial institution by March 28th would still be eligible for partial forgiveness. We should not be putting all of our energy eggs into the wind and solar renewables basket. Now that's according to British climate activist and author Zion Lights. She says doing so would be foolish. Lights says you don't have to look much further than what happened in Germany when they went all in on their green energy.
So a lot of people think they like wind and solar because there's less risk, but the problem is, A, they still require a backup energy source for when it isn't windy and sunny. So that's either going to be fossil fuels or nuclear. B, there is a risk if you're trying to put your whole energy grid in one basket, like Germany did with Energiewende, which was their plan to phase out coal, phase out nuclear, and just do renewables. They spent billions and billions, tens of billions on building wind and solar power. And then what happened? What's happened now? They've had to reopen their mothballed coal-fired power stations because it cannot be done. This transition cannot be done with intermittent energy.
Climate activist and author Zion Lights will also discuss what she sees as the potential benefits of nuclear energy. She'll have details coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 61 points on the day to finish at 20,756. The Dow was up 201 points to 37,468. The S&P 500 was up 41 on the day to 4780, and the Nasdaq was up 200 points to 15,055. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.52 to $74.06 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 16 cents to $2.71 US. Gold was even on the day at $2,023.34 US an ounce, and silver was up 18 cents to $22.74 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.71 per bushel, barley's at $6.36, canola's at $14.26, and corn is at $7.52 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was up $1.73 to $174.83. Feeder cattle were up $2.50 to $230.93, and lean hogs February contract was down 35 cents to $71.10. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.15 US. Recapping one of our top stories, well, it was D-Day for many small business owners across Canada. This was the deadline to pay back the $60,000 Canadian Emergency Business Account loan, otherwise known as the pandemic loan. Now, the silver lining in all of this, if a business owner could pay back at least $40,000 by the day's end, the remaining $20,000 would be forgiven. This is Glaucoma Awareness Month. Now, many specialists say protecting your eyes is key in having healthy vision. Optometrist Dr. Olivia Vergutz will have more in an interview with BCN producer Michael Clausen shortly. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. If your idea of camping in the great outdoors involves a fifth wheel, you need to come to Lethbridge's 2024 largest RV show and sale from February 1st to the 4th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. Western RV Country will be bringing fresh travel trailers, fifth wheels, and teardrop trailers. A great opportunity to see what's new in the world of camping and style. For details, call 403-331-0014. Warm your hearts this season and come enjoy the Winter Light Festival at the Nikayuko Japanese Garden until February 24th. In the month of January, every Thursday to Saturday from 5 to 9 p.m., experience the illumination of over 170,000 lights decorating the beautifully shaped trees and gardens. Ticket prices and various packages are available online at nikayuko.com. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Eyesight is something we should never take for granted, certainly a key aspect to life. Eye health may be something most of us never really give a lot of thought to, but it's a key factor in our overall well-being. Joining us today to talk about eye health is Dr. Olivia Vergutz. She is an optometrist with Visual Effects, partners with FYI Doctors, located in downtown Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Now, I did not know this, but I was informed today that January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. So why don't we start off by asking what glaucoma is and how can we know maybe from symptoms that it might be an issue?
Yeah, absolutely right. January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. Glaucoma is an eye condition that causes damage to our optic nerve. And as that progresses, it can result in irreversible vision loss. There's actually different types of glaucoma. The most common one is called primary open angle glaucoma. This one, you might have heard it referred to as the silent thief of sight. And that's because in its early stages, it actually doesn't have any symptoms. What happens is we have a bit of a higher eye pressure, and over time that pressure can actually cause some mechanical stress on our optic nerve that's at the back of the eye. and that's where the damage can set in. Now, there are some other types of glaucoma that do have symptoms. These can be blurry vision, eye pain or eye redness, nausea and headaches, but these types are a little bit more uncommon.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty serious issue. Now, who is typically at risk for glaucoma?
Yeah, so anyone who has a family history of glaucoma, especially a first-line relative such as our parents, there's an increased risk there. As we get older, that risk increases as well. Anyone who's had an injury to the eye, that can increase our risk as well. And having certain cardiovascular conditions, so high or low blood pressure, different heart conditions as well can be risks as well.
Right, wow. So is there something that can be done to prevent glaucoma?
So a lot of those variables, unfortunately, are things that we can't control. One of the main things is having your regular eye exams with your optometrist. That way they can monitor things and pick up on any potential early signs that may then lead to glaucoma in the future.
Well, that's really interesting. And it's great to have the option to have our eyes checked and go to see someone like yourself. So what kind of treatments are available for glaucoma, and do they have a different level of effectiveness?
Yeah, so effectiveness may vary individual to individual. Commonly, people will be started on an eye drop to lower the eye pressure. There are other laser procedures that ophthalmology can perform, and the laser procedure, what it actually does is opens up the drainage system of the eye to then lower the eye pressure that way. This procedure can be a little more temporary, and often it can be needed to be repeated, and it's often used in conjunction with the drops. If those things don't work, there are further surgeries that can be done, such as drainage tubes or flaps that also can drain some of the fluid as well.
Well, that's very interesting. So is this similar to, let's say, maybe something called conjunctivitis?
No, so conjunctivitis is just affecting the tissue, the clear tissue at the front of the eye over top of the white tissue, the sclera. So there's different types of conjunctivitis. It can be a bacterial conjunctivitis, an allergy, or a viral type of conjunctivitis. So that would be a different condition than what we're talking about there.
Well, thanks for explaining that. It's good to get the clarification and to have a little bit better understanding. And I suppose one way to have a better understanding of our eyes is to have that eye exam that you were talking about. So is there an optimal frequency?
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do on our age. The Alberta Association of Optometrists actually recommends we can have our first exam even around 6 to 9 months of age. At least one exam between the ages 2 and 5. And then kids are typically monitored annually. Around the ages 19 to 64, we'll say at least every 2 years. Anyone 65 years and older are actually covered annually by Alberta Healthcare. Of course, this will all differ person to person, and your optometrist may recommend more frequent visits just based on your own personal eye care needs.
Right. Now, you mentioned children just moments ago in that last answer. So I have been reading some headlines stating that children today, they may be in need of glasses more than previous generations and possibly at an earlier age. Have you seen this, and could you tell us why this might be the case?
Yeah, so we definitely are starting to see both of those things. So nearsightedness, or it's also known as myopia, that's when our vision looking at objects close to us are clear and things a bit further away are blurry. What we've been noticing is that now that technology is becoming a much bigger part of our lives, especially even kids as well, whether it's looking at a phone, a tablet, TV screens, rather than playing outdoors, compared to maybe some of the previous generations, we're finding this has a link to increase in developing this nearsightedness. And so trying to limit those activities or breaking up the time we're doing those, that can help slow down either the progression of nearsightedness or from it starting in the first place.
Right. So then, speaking of that, is there things that we can do to help our eyes stay strong and be healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So that the biggest one I just mentioned, the screen time for children. Now having outdoor time is good. Of course, when we're outdoors, wearing sunglasses, protecting the eyes from the UV sunlight. That can cause different eye progressions or eye conditions to show up, such as cataracts earlier in life, things like macular degeneration. So that's where sunglasses are very important. Having a healthy diet and lifestyle. So staying active, eating leafy green vegetables, things with lots of vitamins like bell peppers, citrus fruits. Smoking can be a big thing that can cause eye conditions, especially macular degeneration. So trying to avoid cigarette smoking. So those are kind of the main things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to keep our eyes healthy.
So then there's also that inverse of it too, of could you give us maybe the top 5 things that cause eyesight to decrease?
Yeah, so I would say definitely those things I listed. So, yeah, so sun protection. So if we're not wearing the sunglasses, having regular eye exams, that way we can detect any of these eye conditions early. No smoking, and healthy diet.
So you had mentioned macular degeneration.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of frightening. Can you give us a description of what that is?
Yeah, so the macula of our eye is at the back of the eye. It's the central area of our retina. And over time, we can notice some damage to that area of the eye. And that things that can cause that are the family history, UV sunlight, smoking, not getting enough antioxidants to protect that part of the eye. And so the trouble with that condition is it's affecting that central vision. So our what the vision rely on the most to see details and that type of thing. So it can, and as it progresses, become definitely a visually devastating condition. So that's definitely one we want to try to catch early and monitor.
Yeah, really sounds very important to have maintenance, not just for other parts of the body, but your eyes. They're just such a critical component of our well-being. So it's really interesting to chat about these things with you because we may not always think about that. And one of the things, of course, I don't wear glasses or contact lenses, so I don't really think in terms of do you have any advice for those who wear contact lenses and maybe related infections? But what's your advice there?
Yeah, so the biggest advice I could probably give there is to follow the recommendations and guidelines that your prescribing optometrist has provided you. So not following these guidelines can lead to increased risk of infection, not getting enough oxygen to the surface of the eye, and that can lead to new blood vessel growth. And both of those things can lead to permanent vision loss as they progress. So those common guidelines are going to be not sleeping in your contact lenses, having proper hygiene and cleaning the lenses, and then also not extending the length that you're using your contacts for. So if it's a daily lens, not wearing it more than that one day, and then monthly lenses, once that 30 days of using that lenses is up, making sure we're switching to a new fresh lens.
Wow, those sound like really important things to keep in mind. I wanted to ask you about dry eyes. And I don't know if that's a regional thing, but it's something that I hear a lot about here in southern Alberta. What do you have to tell us about dry eyes?
Yeah, so definitely where we live, we'll see a higher amount of dry eye just because of our environment. It's very dry climate, very windy. So those types of things will definitely play a factor into it. Again, there's lots of things we can do for dry eye. That's been something that there's been tons of research going into. So of course, there's the things we can do at home, such as eye drops and warm compresses, omega-3 supplements. But we actually have a lot of in-office treatments nowadays that our optometrists can perform if those things aren't helping our symptoms enough. So we're lucky to see that progression and that development with the research to have more things available to treat it.
Right. And so you mentioned the word research, which brings me to my next question about new developments with contact lenses that has come from some different research. Now, apparently this new development for contact lenses can actually help stop the progression of nearsightedness in children. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's definitely correct. We have lots of options nowadays for what we call myopia control, or controlling that nearsightedness progression. So the contact lens specifically, so how they differ between just the normal contact we think about is they include some treatment zones within the lens, and that's been shown to slow that progression and that lengthening of our eyeball, as long as we're wearing the contacts for the recommended period of time.
Well, that's interesting. Now, this one, it still has to do with eyes, a little off topic, but I've some of my friends that work in the trades, you know, they have the choice of safety squints or safety glasses. Can you talk a little bit about even people with hobbies or working in the shop about how to protect our eyes with safety glasses and other things like that?
Yeah, so safety glasses are really important, especially when we're dealing with work environments like that. We often see people coming in that deal with metal work, and they're getting little foreign bodies, metal in the eyes, and depending where that metal lands, it can leave scars and that type of thing. So the more that we can protect that things from getting into our eyes like that, the healthier they will be. Protecting them from trauma as well, if we're in a workplace where those incidents can happen as well.
Yeah, the safety glasses are always better than safety squints, that's for sure. So I wanted to ask you about cataracts. And I'm sure that technology has come a long way over the last 30 or 40 years. But I wanted to ask you, can you tell us the cause and maybe the age that cataracts tend to start at?
Yeah, so cataracts happen when the lens inside our eye starts to become clouded. Most commonly, this occurs with age. So that'd be the most common cause of the cataracts. UV sunlight is something that can cause cataracts to increase. Having certain systemic conditions, so things like diabetes can cause those to develop. There are some medications that can cause cataracts to develop earlier. And there actually are some congenital cataracts. That's not as common, but some kids are actually born with the cataracts.
Wow. And so do sunglasses, like actually good, like polarized lenses, do those actually help from maybe preventing the formulation of cataracts?
Yeah, so anytime we can keep those sunglasses on that have that 100% UV protection, it's going to filter that light out before it gets to the lens in our eye. And then by doing that, yeah, it can slow down that development or progression of cataracts.
Interesting. I've never thought of that being a benefit of some good polarized lenses in sunglasses. Now, a lot of people go for cataract surgery. How much of a process is this? And is there a large success rate to these surgeries?
Yeah, so nowadays, cataract surgery is very successful surgery to have done. It is a day surgery, so typically one eye is done at a time, and it usually only lasts about 10 to 15 minutes per eye. And so, yeah, absolutely, that success rate is much higher now. There's different technologies. Our surgeons are very successful and good at what they do. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about is laser eye surgery. That's become quite popular. What can you tell us about that? Maybe how long it lasts? Is it a forever cure?
So the kind of length of it lasting that can vary person to person. We're finding a lot more success nowadays with laser eye surgery, and a lot of that has to do with the preoperative assessments they put each individual through. That way they can first determine if you're a good candidate for it, which has shown the success rates to increase. So typically when someone has laser eye surgery, it's correcting for their distance vision. So there's a very high percentage of people getting to 20/20 vision once having that surgery done. What they might notice later in life, or typically will notice, is what we call presbyopia. And that's where everyone starts to lose the natural focusing ability of our eye. And so at some point, they may need reading glasses once that starts to set in.
Gotcha. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Dr. Vergutz, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Dr. Olivia Vergitz is an optometrist with visual effects, partners with FYI Doctors here in Lethbridge.
For a number of environmentalists, the countdown to the end of the world from the threat of climate change is on. British author and activist Zion Leitz has taken the challenge to offer viable solutions to the doom and gloom surrounding climate alarmism and government mandates. She's also a former spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion UK on both radio and television between 2018 and 2020. Zion, thanks so much for joining us today from Exeter, England.
Thank you for having me.
So what's your perspective on the current state of global warming alarmism? How do you think it really affects the environmental discourse today?
I think the problem is that people have become very negative, and I don't think any problems are really solved by just focusing on the problem itself. I think we really need to think about solutions. And what you have is a whole generation now of young people with high levels of eco-anxiety saying that they don't see the point, that their futures have been taken away. You know, we heard Greta Thunberg say this. And, you know, this isn't a reason for them to fight back and to fight for positive change in the world, which is a real shame, because actually some of the loudest voices in that area are those with the most powerful voices in the world. You know, if you are from this kind of background like I am and grew up in the West, you're actually quite privileged, and there's a lot that you can do. So I think the alarmist rhetoric is just actually preventing action from happening, even though perhaps the people that came up with the idea thought that it would alert people and push them into action. It's now become detrimental, I think, to the cause.
What are your thoughts on some of the young people I've seen that are actually throwing food at artwork and art galleries, or they're gluing their hands to a highway? I've seen some young people being hauled off the Autobahn so they're not killed. I mean, the Autobahn in Germany, last time I checked, there's not a speed limit, so that's pretty dangerous. What are your thoughts on some of those actions from some of these climate alarmists?
I feel sorry for them. I think they're being misled, and they're being told that they have to put their entire futures on the line because the problem is that serious. And if they don't, then they're part of the problem. And so these young people are risking jail. They're risking, as you say, you know, quite high risk, quite scary scenarios. Here they block roads, they hang from bridges, and they just, you know, you watch videos of their interviews, and they, you know, I think they're kind-hearted people who really want to see change in the world, and they've been misled, and they're anxious. They haven't been led towards solutions. They're being told that there's an apocalypse coming, and that if they don't act, it's on them. And I think that's really quite dangerous messaging. And again, it's not solving the problem at all. It's not helping them. It's mostly just causing divisiveness. At least over here, people are getting very annoyed with them because they're just disrupting ordinary life every day. And, you know, as I say, there are so many positive solutions that they could fight for if they put their energy in that direction. I think they'd be brilliant. But unfortunately, that scary narrative has really taken hold on a lot of young people now.
Oh yeah, you're seeing it all over the place. Now, Zion, considering your background in science communication, what evidence-based solutions do you believe can really effectively address climate change, especially in the context of nuclear energy?
So first of all, we've been sold a lie by the traditional environmental movement, which is that we can solve this problem by all addressing our individual actions and doing less. Now, it might be true if you have a really, really highly carbon intensive lifestyle, but that's a very small percentage of the population. Not going to touch that for the minute. But if you think about most of the things that we're being told to do, these are very, very small differences that they make to the world. Yes, you can recycle, and I do recycle. Yes, you can eat less meat, or you can drive less, or whatever. But it's a very, very small difference that's going to make, actually. And yet so many people who care have put their drive and emphasis and money into that. And it's kind of fraudulent, actually, because if you look at the actual problem, all we need to do is address our emissions. Bring down the emissions. We don't have to sacrifice our quality of life. We don't even have to sacrifice convenience to a large degree. We just have to bring down emissions. Now, that can be attained by large quantities of energy. Now, historically, that energy has come from fossil fuels because they are reliable, they've been cheap, they've been plentiful, and they enabled us to escape human poverty. Most of human history, we did live in poverty. Now we need another abundant energy source that, you know, isn't highly environmentally taxing, that doesn't create air pollution, doesn't drive climate change. That is nuclear energy. That's the scientific consensus that it's needed to decarbonize. The only large industrialized nations in the world that have managed to do without nuclear is just just Norway, basically, because they have a lot of hydropower, which is a geographical advantage. Most places don't have a lot of hydropower, and even other countries that do, like Sweden, still have a lot of nuclear energy in the mix. And Sweden actually is now building new reactors as well, because they're thinking ahead to the fact that actually we're going to need more energy to get out of this crisis. It's not just about nuclear either. You think about a lot of the other solutions. What are we doing? We're switching to electric vehicles. That requires more energy. We're going from gas boilers to heat pumps. That requires more energy. We are an energy-rich civilization, and we will remain an energy-rich civilization. We only need to make sure we meet those needs and increasing demands instead of telling everyone to live with less.
So how do you put people's fears at ease when it comes to nuclear energy and nuclear power, that we don't have another Chernobyl incident?
So, I mean, Chernobyl is a really good example, actually, because it will never happen again. It was an RBMK reactor, which they're not built anymore because it was known that this was a flawed design. It was a flawed design, but the Soviet Union created it, so they wanted to use it, and they built lots of them. Well, actually, nobody builds these anymore, ever. And the few that are still in existence in Russia, they've been upgraded so they can't explode. But that flaw was that that reactor was capable of exploding. Modern reactors cannot explode. So it was really a one-off situation. Equally, there was a problem that the government at the time the Soviet Union didn't want people to know what had happened. So they brought people on site to try and clean up the problem, who were then exposed to more radiation, when actually what they should have done is completely evacuate the area, and they would have prevented a couple thousand deaths. But even then, I think you have to look at it in context. So what I usually say to people who are afraid of nuclear energy is to look at the statistics, because the numbers really speak for themselves. The number of deaths from nuclear are a few thousand in total across history. That includes Chernobyl, that includes Fukushima, and that includes 3 Mile Island. The latter two, nobody died because of the meltdown. A lot of people were afraid and panicked, but nobody died because of the meltdown. So actually, then if you look at deaths from fossil fuels, talking about air pollution alone, there's at least 9 million deaths a year attributed to burning fossil fuels. I mean, this is a no-brainer, even if you don't care about climate change. I mean, I think we should care about climate change, but even if you take that off the table, we need a clean source of energy that still provides us with our high-quality lifestyles, and that is nuclear energy.
Solar and wind power often hailed as green energy solutions at different sources. Zion, what are your thoughts on these renewable energy options?
Well, I think the term renewables is a bit of a misnomer because it lumps together so many different things. As I said, hydropower is very reliable, very powerful, also has an element of danger. Everything has an element of risk. If you think about the Bankyo Dam disaster in China, there's a few 100,000 people died, again, more than from any nuclear incident ever. I'm not saying don't build it. I'm saying there's always a risk. So a lot of people think they like wind and solar because there's less risk. But the problem is, A, they still require a backup energy source for when it isn't windy and sunny. So that's either going to be fossil fuels or nuclear. B, there is a risk if you're trying to put your whole energy grid in one basket, like Germany did with Energiewende, which was their plan to phase out coal, phase out nuclear, and just do renewables. They spent billions and billions, tens of billions on building wind and solar power. And then what happened? What's happened now? They've had to reopen their mothballed coal-fired power stations because it cannot be done. This transition cannot be done with intermittent energy. People don't want to live with intermittent energy. People don't want to have ration energy. And frankly, we need lighting and heating and air conditioning, and for our hospitals to work, and all of these ordinary things that we've become very used to but are very energy dependent. So they've now backtracked on that. But you do have other countries now, like Australia, trying to follow a similar plan. They're closing their coal-fired power stations. They're not lifting their ban on nuclear energy. They're instead trying to do just wind and solar. And they say the batteries are great. If you look at the batteries they're buying, they're spending billions of pounds on 3 big batteries. And let me tell you something, each one of those batteries will only store electricity for 3 to 4 hours. That is the science. Anyone's free to look that up. It's a mistake, actually, and I think it will put a lot of people out of jobs, which will just make them fight against an energy transition that does need to happen. It'd be much better to do what they're doing in America, where they're shifting over coal workers to a nuclear industry and making sure they still have the jobs. They use existing infrastructure. This is a good, healthy energy transition, but let's not rely too much on intermittent sources of energy.
So if you were to put them beside each other, solar and wind versus nuclear power, how would they really compare in terms of sustainability and efficiency?
So, I mean, they can work well together, and there's lots of countries that have managed that, like France. And I tend to represent the scientific consensus, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the same report, the same body that puts out the report saying we need to act on climate change. They've also said we need a combination of nuclear and renewables to make this happen. Now, I think part of it is that there's a social license for wind and solar that isn't necessarily there for nuclear in a lot of countries. In some countries it is, but in some there's still an uphill battle. So to some degree, it's easier to get them built. Also, the upfront cost looks very cheap if you don't factor in the backup, if you don't factor in the fact they need to be replaced every 20 to 25 years. But that is creating a lot of waste, and that does mostly go to landfill. Now, some people will say, they'll argue with that and say, but we can recycle them. Well, then we should, and that should be a cost that's in that original kind of, when you put that money forward for wind and solar, it should be costed in, and it's not, because actually they do tend to end up in landfill sites. So what we're doing is we're choosing something that lasts for less long, that takes up an infinitely, significantly bigger amount of space than nuclear power plants, because they require a lot of land. And then they need replacing after a couple of decades, and then that goes to landfill sites. So actually, if you look at it really honestly, it's not the greener option at all. This is, again, kind of fraudulent claim that people are making. I think having a panel on your house that helps provide some of your own electricity, that could be quite a decent way to go ahead if you're willing to then replace that in 25 years and make sure it's recycled. But otherwise, you're better off having a nuclear reactor down the road, providing good, clean, unionized jobs for people, and that will produce a lot of energy with a small amount of land, using a small amount of space for a lot of people for 60 plus years. In fact, in Finland now, they've just extended their 60-year reactors so that they will run for 80 years in total. I mean, that's a lot of bang for your buck, I think.
Speaking of big bucks, let's circle back to nuclear energy here for just a moment. And Alberta Premier Daniel Smith here in Canada was talking about the potential of nuclear energy for our future, but it's quite costly. A lot of investment is needed, and it takes a lot of time to build these nuclear power plants here. Now, in your view, what are some of the big misconceptions surrounding nuclear energy?
Well, so I think one of the conceptions is what you've just outlined. So the cost and the time to build. So the average build time in the world of all the reactors ever built is 7.5 years. That means, yes, some, like in Britain, by the way, we're taking quite a long time. We've had a lot of issues with losing workers and Brexit and then the pandemic. It's taking a long time to build reactors that in South Korea, they're taking only 3 to 4 years to build. So South Korea is a really good example as well, because after they built the reactors, they found that each one, the price of the unit comes down because they just take the workforce and put them on the new reactor. It's like making a Lego model, and they just churn these things out. And now they've struck a deal. They just struck a deal with the UAE, where COP28 is currently being held, where they went, we have no industry, we have no nuclear expertise. How do we build reactors? So South Korea went in, sent a load of engineers, set up an industry from scratch, and built 4 reactors. A 4th one's just come online. Now, these nuclear power plants have taken under a decade to build. And I'm talking about from the conception, setting up the industry. The actual reactors took 5 to 6 years. So it can be done quite quickly. And remember, yes, all right, solar and wind, you could do that much quicker, but you'd still need something as a base load backup for that. You'd still need nuclear or fossil fuels in the background. This is just completely 100% reliable electricity. And yeah, now in the UAE, 25% of their electricity needs are being met by these 4 reactors. So they're kind of going, oh, that was great. And now we have this incredible expertise and all these engineers. Maybe we should build more and export to the regions around us, because they really understand the value of clean energy.
Now, you were involved with the group Extinction Rebellion. Zion, can you explain what that is?
So Extinction Rebellion was founded here. It was primarily an direct action, as we called it, based group where we would take actions to bring public attention and government attention to our 3 demands, which were declare a climate emergency, make commitments to net zero, and basically political revolution. I'll be honest, the 3rd one, which was a shift to citizens' assemblies from the current system, but it's basically political revolution, which I always argued with as not really relevant to climate change. What they say is that the system created climate change, so the system has to change. Anyway, this group really took off here. I was asked, I wasn't there at the conception, but I was asked to be a spokesperson, and I agreed because I felt that they were getting a lot of positive attention at that time, and I thought this could be a real good moment for change. And if I don't do this, other people will go and do these important television slots, and they might misrepresent the data. That in the end, I ended up leaving because other spokespeople were doing exactly that. And I think that does more harm than good. But the movement itself, this is where ideas like net zero and climate emergency and the term climate crisis have come from. They've all come from this group, which has been very powerful all around the world. So I did a bit of work with them for a little while, but I think that they should change direction and focus more on solutions.
Now, you emphasize questioning everything and encouraging people to really think for themselves, Zion. How can we navigate the conflicting information about climate change and really make wise, informed decisions?
I think it's important to look at the official body. So I look at things like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You can look at communications from the United Nations. There are lots of groups. The IPCC is really important because it is the kind of top scientists working in these areas, the top climate scientists and other areas of science as well, crunching numbers and putting that data in reports and regularly updating those reports. Now, they're quite dry and most people wouldn't read them. So the problem is we rely on journalists and other people and people, who just put videos online or write articles, who interpret this their own way. And you'll get people on both sides, some saying it says it's the end of the world. Actually, no, it doesn't. It has an entire chapter on mitigation and how we can fix this. Some say it's not alarmist enough. There's a lot of people on either side, but ultimately these scientists don't have any vested interest. They're just crunching numbers. And they are saying in these reports that actually there's a way out of this. And it does say that we need a lot of renewables and nuclear to do that, to achieve it. And it does say things like, there are areas where we could reduce energy use, but this is not so much in people's everyday lifestyles as it is things like insulating homes. And a lot of these things are just common sense that we should be doing anyway, that really contribute to having a strong, healthy population and a strong economy. So I would point people in that direction to look at what the data says, or to look at what those scientists are communicating themselves, because they can be much better at explaining the numbers than lay people.
Zion Lights is a British author and activist known for environmental work and science communication. Zion, thanks so much for joining us today from the UK.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.